Good morning, teacher. This is David Barona. I am going to talk about task-based language teaching in language and content classes. The principles of communicative language teaching are: communicative language teaching, CLT, is an approach toward language teaching and learning. Its goal is to make use of real-life situations to stimulate language use. According to Brown, we can consider 8 principles to communicative language learning. 1. Using tasks as an organization principle. Using CLT methodologies, grammar is no longer the principal issue. In other words, the development of communicative skills is placed at the forefront, and grammar is only used to support language use in real-life stimulated situations. Number 2. Promoting learning by doing. It is based on the theory that a hands-on approach positively enhances learning, cognitive engagement. In addition, the principle of learning by doing is strongly supported by an active approach to using language in the early stages. 3. Input needs to be rich. There is no way we can replicate this rich input in the classroom in order to develop native language skills. However, input needs to be rich. This is one of the most obvious needs in teaching a foreign language. Students need oral and written input from the teacher, the teaching material, the multimedia resource, or from real interaction. Number 4. Input needs to be meaningful, comprehensible, and elaborated. One essential thing for learning to occur is that the information we process needs to be meaningful. In fact, the information which is being presented must be clearly related to the existing knowledge that the learner already processed. I would like to emphasize the knowledge learning already knows needs to be organized in such a way that the new information is easily assimilated to learners' cognitive structure. 5. Promoting cooperative and collaborative learning. Students work together in small cooperative teams, such as a group of players, to complete activities. In second language learning, students also work cooperatively on language learning tasks, or they even achieve collaborative language learning goals through communicative use of the target language. Number 6. Focusing on form. A focusing on form approach represents a fairly traditional approach to teach grammar, where students spend much of their time in isolated linguistic structures in a sequence predetermined and imposed on them by syllabus designer, while meaning is often ignored. In contrast, a focus on form approach to grammar teaching emphasizes a forming connection, and grammar is thought within connects and through communicative tasks. 7. Providing corrective feedback. Feedback can be recognized in 2 ways: positive feedback and negative feedback. On one hand, positive feedback is when it confirms the correctness of a student's response. Teacher demonstrate this behavior by showing the understanding, agree, etc. On the other hand, negative feedback is known as an error or a wrong or error correction, which has a corrective function on a student language behavior. 8. Recognizing affective factors of learning. Over the years, consistent relationships have been demonstrated between language attitude, motivation, performance, anxiety, and achievement in a second language learning. One characteristic of a language learning that has received a great deal of attention over the past years is the role of anxiety during the learning process. Anxiety manifests itself in many ways, such as self-bleeding, feelings of stress, nervousness, and even bodily responses such as faster heartbeat. There seems to be a clearly negative relationship between anxiety and learning success. The main difference between communicative language teaching (CLT) and task-based language teaching is that CLT is the general approach used nowadays, and task-based language teaching is a branch of it. One problem about language teaching and learning in your educational system is that students leave compulsory education without being fluent and competent in English after 10 years studying it. One of the possible reasons is that most of the exercises have focused on teaching grammar combined with activities that elicit more practical activities. Task definition. Shekan defines a task as an activity in which meaning is primary. There is some sort of relationship to the real world. Task completion has some priority, and the assessment of task performance is in terms of task outcome. Ellis proposed that for an instructional activity to satisfy the criteria of a task, it must satisfy the following criteria. Number 1, the primary focus should be on meaning. 2, there should be some kind of gap. 3, learners should largely or rely on their own resource. 4, there is clearly defined outcome other than the use of language. The task-based syllabus. Distinguishing syllabus design and methodology is controversial. In the case of TBLT, according to Ellis, he distinguished two types of task-based syllabus, one based entirely on unfocused task and one based on focused task. In the former, the development of a syllabus requires only a specification of the task to be included in the syllabus. In the case of the latter, however, it is necessary to specify both the task and the linguistic context to be sought. Implementation of TBLT. How teachers can facilitate learners' performance of remote-based tasks carried out in a whole class context. Teachers can scaffold learning participation in the interaction that arises out of the performance of tasks, orienting learners to focus on meaning by making the task outcome clear from the beginning, make use of the L1 to support the learner's comprehension by gradually shift to use L2, encourage learning to keep going when they fall, encourage learning to use of L2, give clear feedback to learners' verbal and non-verbal responses. Task in language and content-based instruction. It is important to analyze the interface between tasks and content-based instructional. From this perspective, the aim of this TFG is to explore the integration of content with language by means of tasks in a content-based instructional setting. Content-based instructional CBI is an approach in language education that combines language and content learning. The main characteristics are: the syllabus is organized around the content, meaningful tasks are performed while content and language are learned. Methodology follows the principle of communicative language teaching. Finally, the conclusion. Consider findings from my observation and my personal experience in the schools. I think that the way of teaching should not change depending on the subject you are teaching. In content-based instruction, there is a need to find a balance between language and content. Teachers need to find strategies to draw attention to language and content. For instance, in the math session, errors should be pointed out as well as they do in Spanish session. Besides, in a bilingual school, teachers need to encourage the use of L2, otherwise children speak the L1 and instead of language or L2.